I recently hosted a high-level Gen 3 Pokemon tournament, and the things I saw shocked me. Despite being more than 20 years old at this point, the competitive metagame for Gen 3 continues to evolve in ways that I cannot even predict. And this is at the highest level. This was an invitational tournament, the second in the JimVitational series, where the best of the best face off in a 32-player bracket. In this high-stakes environment, the literal highest level Gen 3 can reach, with money on the line as well. There was a prize pool here. You'd be surprised at the crazy stuff some of these players brought, and the general trends as well. Pokemon genuinely rising to possible OU status based on high usage and success here. So let's get into it, why don't we, folks? The biggest trend, I think, in this tournament, and the big story, I think, for 2025 in Gen 3 is the massive rise of Registeel. Registeel is a Pokemon that is pretty good in Gen 3, always has been okay, and has had niche usage here and there, but never to this level. Registeel was used 16 times in this tournament. That may not sound like much, but to put it into perspective, Registeel was used the same amount of times as OU level threat Moltres, the same amount of times. Registeel was used more times than Breloom, Gyarados, and Cloyster as well, who are OU ranked Pokemon. So Registeel, a UUBL previously only having niche use, is now outdoing genuine OU Pokemon in usage. Now why is this? What are people seeing in Registeel all of a sudden? Where is this Registeel mania coming from? First, let's talk a bit about what Registeel actually does, and what its strengths are. Registeel is a Mono-Steel type Pokemon and one of the Regi legendary trio. And despite these guys being legendaries, they've never quite lived up to that status, at least not in the same way as metagame staples like Zapdos and Jirachi feel significantly more legendary. Registeel has also historically been maybe the least popular of the Regi trio. I've gone on record saying that I think Registeel is the worst of the trio, a statement that now is aging pretty poorly, but Registeel is one of those Pokemon that kind of seems really amazing on the surface, but just doesn't do a lot in practice, or at least that's what we used to think. Registeel has a Mono-Steel typing, which is solid. It has Clear Body as an ability, preventing its stats from being lowered, and it has fantastic mixed defensive bulk. It has 150 defense and special defense base, which is very good. It has a solid 80 base HP to work with those defensive stats. And it has lackluster offenses, only 75 in attack and special attack, and a measly 50 speed. So what do these traits give Registeel? Well, previously Registeel was used as a niche win condition on stolier teams sometimes, because it does have access to the move Curse, and it can be a setup sweeper with enough defensive backbone to sit there, Curse, rest, and sort of act like an alternate Snorlax. The advantage of Registeel over Snorlax, though, is that it is immune to sand because of its steel typing. It has Clear Body as well, meaning it's not vulnerable to anti-Lastmon tactics like the occasional Screech or Sand Attack or whatever. And it also has a different defensive profile, different resistances that come with steel typing. Toxic immunity is nice. And Steel itself is an okay neutral attacking type if you're going to run a mono attacker. So that's what Registeel was mostly used for in the past. So naturally, that's the kind of Pokemon that's not going to fit on a lot of teams. It's already a niche alternative to something like Snorlax, but this is a set that requires a lot of support. Fits on very defensive teams with Pokemon like Magneton and Claydol and maybe Suicune. So the kind of team it would fit on is specific, and then it's not even an auto-include on that team style. It's a niche alternative to other Pokemon. For wider use, you would generally much rather use Metagross. This has always been the big problem with Registeel, is that Metagross is right there, and Metagross is, most of the time, way better at a similar job. Metagross may not have the excellent mixed defensive stats Registeel has, but it has massive attack, it has Explosion, a hard-hitting Explosion, it has the excellent attack Meteor Mash, offensive options like Agility. It has a better combination of offense and defense. It is more proactive. It is more threatening. It is generally a better Pokemon. And that is still true. Metagross is still a better Pokemon. But the recent rise of Registeel has actually shown that it can be a pretty good alternative to Metagross with worthwhile traits the Metagross does not have. I think the most significant thing Registeel has going for it over Metagross as a defensive wall on a more general team is access to the move Thunder Wave. Registeel can fill a similar defensive role to Metagross, but with Thunder Wave, it can support slower allies and generally disrupt the enemy more. While Metagross really relies on its attacks to apply pressure, which does the trick a lot of the time, and also the threat of a boom that KOs most things in the game, Registeel, on the other hand, threatens to paralyze things, hindering them in a different way. While Moltres or Charizard can switch in on a Metagross pretty well, and use that defensive switch in for momentum, they can't really do the same against Registeel because of that threat of Thunder Wave. Skarmory can also pretty nicely switch in on Metagross and stomach Meteor Mash, resisting that and also being immune to other coverage, but Thunder Waving Skarmory is much more devastating. That's going to have a permanent effect for the rest of the game, so Registeel having Thunder Wave is a massive deal. Also, its higher special defense is the other thing that makes it really good compared to Metagross. A lot of offensive teams in Gen 3 famously suck against special attackers. It's a big problem, actually. Offensive teams can't really fit like a Blissey. Blissey's pretty passive and pretty slow. It's a great special wall, but it doesn't always fit if you're going for an aggressive game plan. Jolteon can kind of assist these offensive teams, being a fast threat itself while also giving you electric immunity, letting you come in on, Zapdos and Raikou and Starmie and what have you, but even though that helps, Jolteon is not exactly a hard special wall, is it? It's not going to switch safely into like a Celebi Psychic or a Starmie Hydro Pump. So Registeel can not only do what Metagross does and help against the rock types, Aerodactyl, locking into Rock Slide or Double Edge. It can also check Tyranitar pretty well because of its access to Superpower. But also, it helps against the special threats, because its high base special defense is such that you actually can come in and take a Starmie Hydro Pump, or a Celebi Psychic, or HP Fire. In situations where Metagross would comparatively take way more damage from that big neutral special attack, Registeel has the bulk to stomach those, and even though it's not outputting as much offense, it's still a proactive Pokemon. It has Explosion too, it's a weaker Explosion, but it does the trick. It has Superpower, which threatens Blissey, Snorlax, Tyranitar. It has Thunder Wave, that is a very high impact move. It's a bit like a middle ground between Metagross and Blissey almost. It is also a bit sturdier against Dugtrio than Metagross is because of its incredible defenses. And it has an interesting move pool beyond just those options. It has Counter as well, which can be a great way to bait and eliminate Dugtrio or even enemy Metagross, Tyranitar or Snorlax clicking Earthquake. Counter even works on a Celebi HP Fire if you want to be fancy. So Registeel has seen a rise recently because it has fantastic roll compression on these offensive teams that need a nice rock resist. They need the support of Paralysis, but they don't want something so passive as Blissey either against Special Walls, who is a huge momentum sink and can't do as much. Registeel has the best of both worlds. It helps you against Aerodactyl, it helps you against Tyranitar, it helps you against Starmie, Celebi. It can explode, which is proactive. That's what offensive teams want. They want trading, they want aggression. Registeel is this perfect middle point between defense and offense, actually, that does things Metagross does not. Metagross is usually fantastic in that exact role, but it's worse against special threats. Now, of course, Registeel is weak to fire, which is a big problem against, Moltres and Charizard, who are also special attackers, but Registeel can be paired with Pokemon that can handle fire types. Usually Suicune or Starmie would be the water type of choice alongside Registeel here. And it was fun seeing all of the different teams Registeel can fit on, actually. It's a Pokemon that fits on a variety of teams, in fact, when you run it like this, and when you play to its strengths like this. There are teams with and without spikes running, Registeel Rain, Registeel Aggro Spikes, Registeel Dugtrio, like semi-special offense. But one thing's for sure is that this kind of Registeel is the new trend on all of these teams. It's not running the Curse set anymore with Magneton. That's old news. It's running T-Wave, Explosion, and, whatever attacks to fill. Often Seismic Toss, often Counter, often Superpower, but T-Wave and Explosion are the new Registeel staples. And the high usage of Registeel in this tournament and the solid success of it is certainly a trend that I did not predict. And using Registeel myself, I have to admit that it is quite good. It does feel pretty good. If this continues, could it be a new contender for OU status? We'll have to see. Could just be a brief trend, but who knows? The other big trend of this year, and of this tournament, is the significant rise of Raikou. Now, I've spoken before about Raikou's underrated potential in Gen 3 OU. And seeing Raikou in tournaments is not quite as surprising as seeing Registeel, but the rise of Raikou here is still significant. I did not expect to see Raikou used this much, and with this much success. And it feels like there's a real Raikou push lately. Raikou was used 22 times, which is the same amount of times as Jolteon and Charizard, OU staples. Raikou was used more times than Heracross and Moltres as well, which I think is very noteworthy. Raikou has always been an interesting Pokemon in Gen 3, because it's one of those Pokemon that is insanely powerful in the right conditions, but just has a metagame that is hostile towards it, meaning those conditions are hard to meet. Raikou, fundamentally, is a very good Pokemon. It has above average speed, great stats across the board, well distributed, and it has Calm Mind, which is uncommon on electric types. It's a good, fast electric type that can be a speedy win condition, and it sets itself apart from other Calm Mind users in the tier, like Jirachi, Celebi, and Suicune with its high speed. It outruns Gengar, crucially. It outruns most things in the game, but there's one guy it doesn't outrun, Raikou's greatest adversary, Dugtrio, and that's the big problem. Raikou is an electric type that is slower than Dugtrio. That's kind of a death sentence in OU a little bit, because Dugtrio obviously has Arena Trap and Earthquake. Raikou can't switch out and is forced to take that lethal Earthquake to its early grave. The terrible Dugtrio matchup is not good for a Pokemon's viability in OU. But it also doesn't help that Raikou has a dreadful matchup against Blissey. At least Zapdos and Jolteon have a Baton Pass to pivot in the face of a Blissey. Raikou does not have that privilege. And also with its Calm mindset, it can't really afford to run Raw a lot of the time, it prefers Substitute. So the matchup against Blissey is dreadful, and Blissey easily 1v1s the majority of Raikou sets. Raikou also has a dreadful matchup against the common Pokemon Claydol, who has been one of the most popular Pokemon in Gen 3 competitive in recent years, with its fantastic ground typing plus levitate and rapid spin, making it defensively excellent and providing crucial utility to teams with hazard removal. Claydol is everywhere, and Raikou just sucks against Claydol. Claydol is immune to electric, KOs Raikou instantaneously with Earthquake, and shrugs off weak, non-stab hidden power coverage like HP Grass or Ice. Claydol can easily take those and strike back with a lethal Earthquake. Not to mention Raikou's poor matchup against Snorlax. So, Raikou needs a lot of support to function, it would seem. You gotta get rid of Dugtrio or be safe somehow against Dugtrio. You need to get rid of Blissey, / Snorlax, / whatever special world they have. And maybe also get rid of Claydol. You know, at least other special threats can power through Claydol. Raikou needs so much support to function. If there's no Dugtrio, no Blissey, no Claydol, no Snorlax, Raikou goes crazy. If it dodges all those matchups or somehow eliminates all those Pokemon, Raikou's one of the best things in the game. But it just has so many common adversaries that it's always been a bit tough to make Raikou work. So what has been done recently to optimize Raikou and led to its significant rise in tournament usage, especially by number one player in the game, ABR, who has been on a real Raikou tirade recently? The easiest of these bad matchups to overcome is probably the Blissey matchup, because Raikou is a Pokemon that finds itself on special offense teams, and these are teams that are trying to deal with Blissey anyway. Bulky beat-up Dugtrio is a great way to eliminate Blissey, and Raikou is very, very commonly paired with Dugtrio in some form. Many of these Raikou teams just run Dugtrio, but if they don't, they are running some other plan to beat down Blissey and eliminate it over the course of a game, for Raikou to thrive as a sweeper in the later game. But then there's still the problem of the poor matchup into Claydol. And there have been a couple creative ways that players have gotten around this matchup. One interesting way is to run a new option on Raikou, the move Crunch. Raikou does get Crunch, a dark type attack, which is special in Gen 3, and Crunch is much higher damage against Claydol than Hidden Power is, with 80 base power, and being super effective of course. Crunch also conveniently hits other good matchups, like Celebi, and Gengar for super effective damage. With Crunch, Raikou can threaten Claydol much better. Another interesting pairing that I've seen that actually works very well to remedy the Claydol matchup for Raikou is pairing Raikou with Breloom. You see, the thing about Breloom is that one of its most common switch-ins is Claydol, and that's because if you see a Breloom on the enemy team, you can pretty safely assume that they're not running Spikes. Breloom and Spikes don't go very well together. Breloom uses Spore to incapacitate an enemy, and then start applying pressure with a free focus punch. This kind of thing works well on mixed offense strategies, or spikeless offense strategies. It's a way to generate momentum without needing spikes. So Breloom often signals that you're not running spikes. Therefore, Claydol is a pretty good candidate to go to sleep, because Claydol will not be needed as a rapid spinner, probably. Claydol is probably the most common sleep sack against Breloom. If you have a Claydol, it's usually the best thing to go to bed against Breloom. For that reason, Breloom pairs pretty well with Raikou, because if they have a Claydol, they're probably going to switch it in against Breloom and have it go to sleep. If Claydol is asleep, Raikou just got 10 times better, didn't it? Because Claydol is now out of commission. In fact, you can actually HP Grass into it after some Calm Minds and have a pretty good chance to eliminate it because it's just sitting there sleeping, just hoping to wake up. So that is a good pair. Another rather simple way to get past the Claydol matchup and get more out of your Raikou is to run Raikou alongside a Spiker. Raikou can actually fit okay on Spike's teams, and what's nice about pairing it with the Spiker is that Claydol, every time Raikou's in, has to choose between rapid spinning the Spikes away or KOing the Raikou. If you have 3 layers up, the Claydol will probably opt to get rid of those Spikes rather than KOing Raikou. It's more imperative to get rid of the layers. So Raikou can take that turn and use it to get damage in on the Claydol. Eventually they will fall if this interaction keeps happening. Also, the most popular Spikers, Skarmory and Forretress, match up well against Claydol weirdly, because Skarmory is not threatened by anything Claydol can do and can poison Claydol. If Claydol's poisoned, it's way worse at chucking Raikou consistently because it's going to slowly lose its health to the poison. Forretress is able to apply pressure to Claydol with Hidden Power Bug, a stab move that deals respectable damage and means that they can't continuously rapid spin or they will die. With the assistance of Spikers to not only dissuade Raikou from earthquaking but also chip down the Claydol over the course of a game, Raikou actually can find itself in a good position to pose a threat without Claydol ruining its life. Spikes also help Raikou apply more pressure to Blissey, which it usually sucks against. And then of course there is the Dugtrio matchup, Raikou's hardest matchup to overcome. How does Raikou get past Dugtrio? Well, one way is to just kind of be careful with Raikou. Just be careful with it. Raikou is not the only Pokemon weak to Dugtrio in Gen 3OU. Heracross and Breloom suffer from the same problem. Offensive sets of Tyranitar and Jirachi both die instantly to a Dugtrio Earthquake. The reason Raikou is a bit more susceptible to Dugtrio is because its common Thunderbolt click gets completely punished as Dugtrio cleanly comes in and just eliminates you from there. Jirachi at least can pretend to be different sets, threaten Body Slam or Ice Punch, which Dugtrio doesn't want to switch in against. Raikou, on the other hand, is prone to just Thunderbolting into a Dugtrio, but early on, if it's early game and their team is not revealed much and you suspect they could have a Dugtrio, just try not to Thunderbolt into the Dugtrio coming in. Even a simple substitute, just being careful can go a long way when running Raikou. And if you know that they have a Dugtrio, it becomes more awkward for them, especially if they're chipped into range of Hidden Power. Another way to overcome the Dugtrio matchup a little bit is to run Modest Raikou. Now I know that Raikou's greatest asset, or one of its greatest assets, is its high speed stat, but a Modest Raikou can actually be really good too. With the enhanced damage, you are obviously far more threatening, and your speed tier is still quite good, hitting 329 speed, just faster than the base 100 Pokemon. And crucially, with a modest nature, a Hidden Power Grass or Ice from Raikou will have a fantastic chance to one-hit KO Dugtrio, an 87.5% chance to one-hit KO. This makes the substitute click very safe on Raikou because there is no risk of them living HP Grass and hitting you with 2 Earthquakes to KO. They will probably just die to the HP Grass. And in fact, this is kind of a good way to bait and eliminate Dugtrio. Thinking they're completely safe, they will go for this trap and get a Rude Awakening on the stronger than expected Hidden Power coming their way. Another way that Raikou can overcome its Dugtrio matchup is by running a Dugtrio of its own and using that Dugtrio to get rid of the enemy Dugtrio. There are ways to do this, because if Dugtrio ever eliminates a teammate of yours and locks into something other than Earthquake, your Dugtrio can come in, survive the hit, and get rid of them. And with their Dugtrio eliminated, Raikou is safe to be Raikou. If you are running Raikou alongside Celebi, and they select Hidden Power Bug to eliminate Celebi, in comes your Dugtrio, you live HP Bug and get rid of theirs. The same is true of Aerial Ace. If you're running that good old Raikou Breloom combo and the enemy tries to Aerial Ace eliminate your Breloom, you follow up with your own Dugtrio, get rid of their Dugtrio, and now your Raikou once again is safe. Raikou pairs well with Doug anyway, so using these interactions to your advantage to get rid of their Dugtrio makes Raikou significantly better. There's an interesting Raikou curve that's happening here, because Raikou was a really popular Pokemon back in the very early Gen 3 metagame because of its straightforward power. High speed, calm mind, it would tear apart teams that weren't prepared for it. And I guess there was less optimization back then with, Blissey and Claydol and Dugtrio. Then Raikou fell off as, its poor matchup started to rise to the forefront. But now it's rising back up because I think players are getting better at overcoming its poor matchups and getting the most out of its power. It's sort of like Snorlax if you think about it. Snorlax is another Pokemon that has a lot of adversaries in the metagame. It's bad against Skarmory and Gengar and Metagross and Tyranitar and Moltres kind of, because it can Will-O-Wisp. It's got all these bad matchups, it's bad against Sand and Spikes, but if you can overcome all those, Snorlax is one of the best win conditions in the game, or one of the most powerful things in the game. It's just contained by all of these adversarial forces keeping it in check. Raikou is kind of like special attacker version of Snorlax. If you can overcome the hurdles, it becomes the strongest thing ever. And overcoming the hurdles does require creative team building, checking a lot of boxes with as little tools as possible. Designing interactions to try to get rid of their Dugtrio or bait their Claydol to go to sleep, or even run Crunch to threaten Claydol more. But Raikou's strengths have shone through here as players have optimized it, and I think that's really interesting to see. I have personally always been pretty fond of Raikou on special offense strategies just because its high speed remedies one of the problems with the archetype. You can get kind of destroyed by enemies like Starmie and Gengar, who are these fast offensive threats that can outrun and stop your offensive game plan. Raikou is a special threat, synergizing with Dugtrio, that matches or outruns that speed benchmark, making it much more threatening than most Calm Mind sweepers. Plus, I would say that Jirachi and Celebi and other common Pokemon on the special offense archetype are just as vulnerable to a Jolly Dugtrio, a simple Jolly Dugtrio, as Raikou is. Maybe Raikou is a bit easier to trap because of the Thunderbolt it commonly clicks, but if you're just a bit more careful and you don't play into that early on especially, you try to check the team, try to reveal whether they have a Dugtrio or a Claydol or not, and play smart, then Raikou can be used to great effect. It's a combination of teams being more optimized to support Raikou with less effort, and players becoming better at planning around the Raikou win condition, and not playing into its common pitfalls either. And these things, I think, have resulted in Raikou's interesting rise in this tournament. Those are the most meta-defining and significant trends of the year and of the tournament, but I'd also like to talk about some other noteworthy Pokemon usage stats here. Can I give some credit to my goat, Glalie, who many thought I was lying when I said that Glalie was good in OU. They thought I was lying, that I was exaggerating, but look at this. Glalie has been used 5 times in the damn Gymvitational 2 with a 60% win rate. Glalie has a higher usage than Ludicolo, Misdreavus, Porygon 2. Higher usage than Hariyama, who some used to call the best UUBL, paling in comparison to Glalie usage and Glalie win rate. I think it's wonderful to still see Glalie propping up here and there. If you don't know, Glalie is an interesting offensive Spikes lead because it has access to the unique combination of Spikes, Stab Ice Beam, and Explosion. Since it is a mono ice type, it has pretty nice lead matchups, especially against Zapdos and Salamence. Zapdos if you're EV'd the right way, can't quite 2-hit KO Glalie, and thus if it Thunderbolts twice into Glalie, they will activate their Salac Berry. So Glalie is fantastic at just making spikes against Zapdos, threatening it with Ice Beam and Explosion. Glalie also destroys Salamence, who can't KO with Fire Blast and gets KO'd instantly by Ice Beam. Glalie is great at setting layers against Suicune or Skarmory lead, and even though you're bad against Tyranitar and Meta lead, you can probably run some switch outs for those. It's like an alternative to Smeargle, but I think it has better lead matchups because of the offensive potency of the Stab Ice Beam that actually does threaten common leads. It's like a Smeargle that doesn't get destroyed by a slight breeze, you know? It can actually pack a punch a little bit. So I've always loved Glalie. I think Glalie's fantastic, and seeing Glalie here still doing stuff in 2025 is wonderful. It has a genuine place in Gen 3 OU, can you believe it? This is an Ice type with 80 stats across the board. No one would think this is a competitively real Pokemon, but it is, damn it, it is. They're saying so. I would also like to give some respect to Ludicolo here, not only because it was the most popular Rain Dance Pokemon of the tournament, being used more times than Kingdra, who most consider the best Swift Swimmer. Ludicolo was more popular in this tournament, and it had a very high win rate actually. It was used 4 times with a 75% win rate. So it wins 3 out of 4 of the times it was used. That's pretty good, man. Ludicolo is, of course, the more sturdy of the 2 Swift Swimmers in OU that are popular. Kingdra is a more offensively powerful Pokemon that is a great fit on special offense teams with an aggressive game plan. And Kingdra also probably has a better typing. Water Dragon is only weak to Dragon itself, meaning Kingdra can set up Rain Dance pretty nicely against almost anything and survive hits from the majority of incoming attacks. Ludicolo, on the other hand, is a Water Grass type Pokemon, which is better in some ways but worse in others. Ludicolo is vulnerable to flying and bug type attacks where Kingdra is not. But Ludicolo is better at switching in against Metagross. Ludicolo is actually one of the best Metagross switch-ins in the entire game because it resists Steel and Ground, which are the primary attacking types of Metagross. Ludicolo also has access to Leech Seed, giving it way better mid-game value than Kingdra. Kingdra is usually a late-game cleaner that doesn't stick around very long if you use it. It doesn't have longevity. You go in with it once, you Rain Dance and click moves at the end of a game, usually. Ludicolo, on the other hand, actually has good defensive traits, and it can click Leech Seed in the mid-game to just heal itself up a little bit, apply pressure to the enemy, and actually wall key targets that are pretty nice to wall. It's good against Swampert and Metagross. But also, it has the Rain Dance Swift Swim combo for the end game. Maybe Ludicolo's superiority in the mid-game is making it more popular as a Swift Swim Pokemon in these high-level games, and it is present on teams that aren't as all-in on a special offense game plan. Ludicolo is being used for its Weather Clear capabilities to support Suicune and Heracross on teams that are a bit more balance-oriented with, Claydol and Snorlax and Suicune. Slower-paced Rain is where Ludicolo fits, I guess, and maybe slower-paced Rain is better than Kingdra's Aggro Rain in the current meta. How interesting. In this tournament, there was a singular usage of the Pokemon Lapras. Lapras was used once, and it was victorious in that one game. And it was brought by none other than Super Epic Ampharos. Famous gamer Super Epic Ampharos has done it again. Lapras weirdly kind of makes sense on this team if you look at it. This team by Super Epic Ampharos is a Jolteon Spikes team, a very aggressive style. Jolteon, with its high speed and access to the move Roar, can force switches and rack up Spikes damage like almost nothing else. And Jolteon, with its ability Volt Absorb, certainly synergizes with Lapras, wouldn't you say? Because Lapras is weak to Electric. Water types and Jolteon are common in competitive Pokemon, and it's a very old idea for synergy, but Lapras here is interesting, because Lapras also helps the team out against offensive water types, like Starmie and Suicune. And the combination of Jolteon and Lapras is really good against Starmie in particular, because, Lapras comes in on the Hydro Pump, shrugs off the Ice Beam, and Jolteon comes in on the Thunderbolt, and they kind of invite one another, if you think about it. There's also a Charizard on this team, and Charizard actually appreciates the defensive support of Water Absorb since it's weak to water too. Charizard famously terrible against Suicune, generally bad against offensive water types, of course, being a fire type, with only a weak hidden power grass to threaten them. So Lapras is perfect. Lapras has Water Absorb, Stab Ice Beam, and the fantastic Bolt Beam coverage combo. And if you look at this team, without the Lapras, you would actually kind of suck against Suicune and offensive Starmie. Even though there is a Jolteon, that Jolteon is holding the world on its shoulders. It can't defend against water types forever. It can't switch in on water moves. This Lapras sort of rounds things out. It's kind of smart. It's like a weird offensive Starmie, but instead of having rapid spin and speed, you have water immunity and stab ice speed. It's a trade-off that in this case makes some sense, wouldn't you say? Now the set wasn't fully revealed. All this Lapras did this game was just click Ice Beam once. Admittedly, it didn't hit the matchup it was probably hoping to hit with no offensive water type on the team, but it still did something. It still eliminated the enemy Zapdos, and on the team it does make sense covering a bad matchup, or multiple bad matchups. This is a rare Lapras usage that I'd support and think is smart. When you break it down, it's not just a funny meme pick, it's a valid choice on this team right here. And now I would like to highlight some interesting choices in the tournament that regrettably didn't win. Which may seem like, if it didn't win, doesn't that mean it's bad? Well, I don't know. I think that bringing it to this tournament suggests that you had some faith in it, and maybe it didn't work out, but at least bringing it to the invitational tournament with money on the line is still saying something. It still means that there's something there. And I think the most out there pick of this whole tournament was the singular bring of Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee I don't think is a Pokemon I've ever seen in higher level Gen 3 before. And it was brought by the epic player Ban Manaphy on an unbelievable Glalie plus Hitmonlee Spikes offense. It's one of the most epic teams I've ever heard of, damn it. With Hyper Beam Tyranitar as well, by the way. Hyper Beam Tyranitar on the team. Now, if you look at this squad, I could see the reasoning behind maybe running a fighting type here, because the team does need an additional Tyranitar answer of some sort. Without this Hitmonlee, you would be leaning very heavily on the Metagross as a Tyranitar answer, and this Metagross seems to be an aggressive one with agility and even double edge. So I don't know how well that would work out, and your Tyranitar matchup would be pretty bad without some other form of support against it. Hitmonlee can at least come in on Rock Slide, and it has Muck Punch to threaten Tyranitar with priority. But I can't help but wonder why Hitmonlee and not Breloom. Because Breloom would fit fine here, I think, and serve a similar purpose. Hitmonlee, though, is a faster Pokemon. It has 300 speed. Hitmonlee has a mono-fighting typing, which has its advantages. It is not vulnerable to Aerial Ace from Dugtrio. It is not weak to fire or ice, so that has some value, perhaps. And Hitmonlee has the ability Limber, which grants paralysis immunity. Maybe Hitmonlee switches in nicely against Blissey, because Blissey with Thunder Wave would kind of eat this team alive, wouldn't it? There's no real switch into Thunder Wave Blissey. But Hitmonlee can switch in, it's immune to paralysis, and it's forcing Blissey out like that. Maybe that was the idea, perhaps? So it's a better switch in to Thunder Wave Blissey than Breloom is, and it also has that Muck Punch, and it's a bit more sturdy against Dugtrio and elemental damage and such. Now, the Hitmonlee here was running Substitute, and at first I thought that it was Substitute with a berry, but no berry activated in the game, so I'm not sure what item this has. Maybe it has Black Belt to increase fighting type damage to help it get higher rolls against Tyranitar. That could be it. And Substitute and Muck Punch are the only moves revealed on this. I can only assume it has another fighting move, and probably a Ghost type move for further coverage. That's pretty common. I don't know, though. I don't know, but that's what I would guess, is like Brick Break or Sky Uppercut and Hidden Power Ghost on the set. Maybe it has Substitute Focus Punch combo, though. Maybe Substitute suggests Focus Punch. It was a bold choice that I thought was noteworthy. Didn't quite work out, but you can maybe see some logic to the Hitmonlee choice here. And finally, folks, I think we gotta shout out the 2 Ursaring brings in the tournament. And wouldn't you know it, guess who brought Ursaring? Ban Manaphy brought it, and Super Epic Emperors brought it, these two known for bringing some out there stuff. Both like-minded in their Ursaring fondness. Now, many are bearish on Ursaring for clear reasons. Ursaring's slow and frail. There's many reasons to be bearish on Ursaring. I think that Ursaring's kind of interesting, though, as an alternative guts, bulky attacker. Well, it's not really that bulky, but it can work with Thunder Wave support. It's like a weird mini Snorlax that's worse, but it's interesting. It's interesting. It has more breaking power than Snorlax, I think. And Super Epic Ampharos here just led with the Ursaring, which I've never seen before, but if you think about it, Ursaring's not too bad of a lead. It's bulky enough, just bulky enough to survive most incoming hits. It has good coverage, and it can threaten many common leads. Zapdos is certainly a good lead matchup, as Thunderbolt won't KO you, and Super Epic Ampharos here just clicks Double Edge, which KOs the Zapdos, and I can only imagine that's choice-banded Ursaring for that damage roll. I think a Banned Earthquake would KO Tyranitar. Banned Double Edge would KO a lot of things with it neutral. And maybe it's running Sleep Talk for sleep matchups. Maybe a Smeargle spores you and you hit him with the Sleep Talk Double Edge, and that's dealing 10,000 damage. So I'm partial to the idea of an Ursaring, Banned Ursaring lead. It's actually alright, I think. Certainly one way to use the guy. And that did work out. Did eliminate an entire Zapdos. Now the game ended up being a loss, but it wasn't Ursaring's fault. Ursaring probably improved the odds of success, while, Heracross and Suicune here were not pulling their weight. It's hardly Ursaring's fault on this one. Hardly. And then Ban Manaphy was running a different take on an Ursaring strategy. What appears to be a mixed offense with Rapid Spin Claydol to support the Snorlax and such and be an exploder. Snorlax running Fire Blast, for goodness sake, to threaten Skarmory and Forretress, and the Ursaring just here as a breaker, like what a Heracross would do. And let's see how it did in the battle. Where did Ursaring come into the mix? Now this is interesting right here. This Jolteon has paralyzed the enemy Jirachi, has used Wish to support an incoming switch, and guess who comes in? It is Ursaring, completely safely coming in, and in prime position to pose a threat against a paralyzed Jirachi. So that's a pretty nice way to maneuver in Ursaring. Goes for the Focus Punch and eliminates Skarmory. Beautiful work from Ursaring. Beautiful. But this is where some people do get a bit bearish on Ursaring, because with all that setup, it did get a successful punch on a Skarm that's already low, but now in comes Salamence to intimidate it, and Ursaring is... well, it's still doing pretty decent damage with Return right there. And it's bulky enough to not get too hit by Dragon Claw, but no, that Focus Punch was ambitious, and Salamence is happy to just Dragon Claw again. And now Ursaring is defeated. Now Ursaring is gone, and who's here to mourn him at his funeral? Nobody. So Ursaring did not feel great there. It was a lot of setup to even get Ursaring on the field safely because it's frail to begin with, and then you go for the Hail Mary Punch, which could have really worked. The Hail Mary Punch could have gone crazy if Tyrannosif came in, but it didn't, and Ursaring fades into nothing once again, fading into obscurity. Will this showing mean that we never see Ursaring again in high-level play? I hope not. I hope that they do something with Ursaring. I hope that people keep trying Ursaring, because I think it's cool. It's a bear. And I don't believe people should be so bearish on it. It has guts. It has some stuff. I think that this is probably the team where it would be alright. The Thunderwave Wish Jolt is a pretty fantastic way to support the Ursaring. But it does feel pretty easy to stop, doesn't it? It feels pretty easy to stop. And that's about all I have to say here, folks. Gymvitational 2 was a wonderful tournament. I urge you all to check out the Revival Tournaments channel, where commentary is posted for all of these tournaments that we host. The Gymvitational 2 recently finished coverage there, but there's also the ADV Revival 3 tournament, which is ongoing now. That is a open tournament where anyone can join. It's non-invitational. Gen 3 OU is, of course, my favorite competitive metagame, and I do love seeing all the new stuff these fellas come up with and the trends that I could scarcely have predicted. What was your favorite team from the Gymvitational this time around, folks? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you very much for watching.